What if the deadliest weapon in modern warfare isn't a missile streaking overhead or a bullet whistling past? What if it's a silent signal you never notice? A hush so profound that by the time you sense it, the battle is already lost. On the 23rd of October, 2023, reports began to trickle in from the east of Ukraine. At first, it sounded like the usual fog of war. Ukrainian forces in the Pokrovsk sector were said to be withdrawing, perhaps repositioning for tactical reasons. But as the day wore on, a darker picture emerged. Eyewitnesses described utter mayhem. Soldiers deserted their posts, some sprinting away with only the gear on their backs. Vehicles were left idling, hatches open, supplies untouched, as if their operators had simply vanished into thin air. Stockpiles, weeks' worth of ammunition, food and fuel, were left behind in panicked haste. Surprisingly, the devastation didn't rain down from above. There were no massed artillery barrages or waves of airstrikes. Early commentators, clinging to old narratives, assumed the usual. Perhaps a surprise bombing campaign or a sudden armored thrust. But the real cause crept in, not with noise, but with silence. In this new form of battle, it was not steel or fire that broke the defenders. It was the sudden surgical cutting of digital lifelines. The very webs of connectivity, invisible but essential, were unraveled in a matter of hours. Consider this. The radio nets, normally buzzing with orders and updates, went dead in an instant. Drone feeds, the eyes in the sky for every modern army, blinked out one by one. Commanders, once able to direct entire sectors from mobile command posts, found themselves isolated, unable to issue commands or receive reports. They were forced to make life-or-death decisions based on mere rumor, scraps of garbled information, or the fearful whispers of subordinates. Official statements from Kiev painted a picture of calm, planned withdrawal, a tactical repositioning to save men and materiel. The language was careful, measured, designed to reassure. But the reality was far less orderly. Satellite images, released by independent analysts, told their own story. Long columns of vehicles streamed westward, some bumper to bumper, many leaving behind tanks and armored personnel carriers that were still in working order. The roads were littered with abandoned gear and even personal effects. This was not a disciplined fallback. It was a rout, triggered not by firepower, but by a paralyzing strike on the very nervous system of the defense. The devastation in Pokrovsk was not an isolated event, nor a mere quirk of battlefield confusion. It was, in fact, the most vivid demonstration yet of a new era in warfare. One where the greatest weapon is not a bomb, but the silent, targeted disruption of communication and control systems. To understand why this matters, let's revisit the old rules of war. For centuries, the fall of a fortress required overwhelming force, sieges that stretched for weeks or months, relentless bombardment, the grinding attrition of infantry and tanks. Think of Stalingrad in World War II, when entire armies clashed for every block, or Verdun in World War I, where artillery shells reshaped the very earth. The textbooks are filled with examples. The defenders lose only when they are outgunned, exhausted, or cut off from resupply. But Pokrovsk broke every rule in the book. Its fall was not the result of physical exhaustion or overwhelming firepower. Instead, it showcased what can happen when an army's digital lifelines are severed with precision. When the radios fell silent and the drone feeds went dark, the defenders were left blind and mute. Panic spread, not because the enemy was at the gates, but because no one knew what was happening, where to go, or who was in command. This isn't just a military problem. In our hyperconnected world, armies, governments, and even civilian life all depend on invisible networks of information. If you are watching this, and assuming it's only about soldiers and tanks, think again. Every power grid, hospital, emergency responder, and even the smartphone in your pocket relies on stable, secure communication. The illusion that order and safety are guaranteed is just that, an illusion. The Pokrovsk collapse is a warning shot heard around the world. It signals a turning point, a moment when the rules of conflict changed forever. Wars are no longer won solely by the side with the most guns or the biggest bombs. Now, the ability to disrupt, to inject chaos into the enemy's digital backbone, can decide the fate of entire cities or even nations. Let's get concrete. How exactly did this digital sabotage unmake one of the strongest defensive positions in Ukraine's east? Let's break down the tools and techniques that rewrote the fate of Pokrovsk and could, in time, rewrite the fate of any modern state. The arsenal of this new era includes precision jamming, where electronic signals are used to overwhelm enemy radios and satellite links. It includes false transmissions. Hackers or electronic warfare specialists inject phony orders, causing units to move at the wrong time or abandon positions they should have held. Supply lines, so often thought of as trucks and rail cars, are now digital. A single blackout can leave entire units without food, fuel, or ammunition. Not because the roads are bombed, but because the trucks simply never got the message to move. Historical parallels abound. During World War II, the Allies famously broke the German Enigma code, allowing them to intercept and manipulate enemy communications. In the Gulf War, the United States used electronic warfare to blind Iraqi air defenses before the first bombs fell. But these were mere previews. In Pokrovsk, the strikes were total. Every means of communication, from radios to satellite phones, was targeted at once. There was nowhere left to turn. Imagine a scenario. A battalion is holding a key crossroads outside Pokrovsk. At dawn, their radios go dead. The drones they rely on for surveillance stop feeding back images. The battalion commander, cut off from higher headquarters, must choose: hold the position and risk encirclement, or retreat based on a half-heard rumor that enemy tanks are flanking from the north. Meanwhile, another unit picks up a garbled transmission, possibly a fake, ordering a withdrawal. Confusion reigns. Some units retreat, some stay, and others wander off in search of orders that never come. Within hours, the entire defensive line has dissolved, not because of a breakthrough, but because no one knows what anyone else is doing. This is exactly what happened at Pokrovsk. The defense did not crack in a wave of fire and steel. It unraveled in eerie digital silence. And this method is terrifyingly scalable. The same tactics could be used against any army, in any country, at any time. As military analyst Peter Singer once put it, the next war may be over before you even know it started. The implications are profound. If you can disrupt an army's ability to communicate, you can defeat it without ever facing it in battle. If you can sow confusion and panic through digital means, you can force retreats, cause surrenders, and take ground without firing a shot. This is not science fiction. It is the reality of 21st century conflict. Let's look at another example. In 2007, Estonia, a small Baltic nation, was crippled by a massive cyber attack. For weeks, banks, news outlets, and government websites were knocked offline. There were no explosions, but the country ground to a halt. Estonia responded by becoming one of the world's leaders in digital defense, building redundant systems, training cyber experts, and even hosting NATO's Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence in its capital, Tallinn. Their experience is a template for what every nation must now consider. Digital resilience is as important as physical defense. Returning to Pokrovsk, the immediate consequences were catastrophic. Command posts, the brains of the defense, were abandoned as officers realized they could no longer coordinate their troops. Units became isolated, each group acting on its own, some freezing in place, others retreating blindly. In the chaos, some groups even blocked each other's escape routes, unsure who was friend and who was foe. The great defensive machine, meant to act as one, shattered into desperate, isolated fragments. And the psychological effects were just as devastating. Morale collapsed, not because of enemy fire, but because every soldier realized they were alone. The sense of trust, so vital in any fighting force, evaporated. Without orders, some units simply vanished into the countryside, later to be found huddled in isolated pockets, still waiting for a signal that would never come. We must remember, too, that war is not just about soldiers. The same vulnerabilities exist in civilian life. Imagine if a cyber attack took down the power grid in a major city. No lights, no communications, no water pumps. Hospitals would struggle to operate. Traffic lights would fail, causing chaos on the streets. Banks would go offline, leaving people unable to access their money. In 2015, Ukraine itself experienced a taste of this when suspected Russian hackers turned off the power to hundreds of thousands of homes in the dead of winter. The blackout lasted only a few hours, but the message was clear. Digital attacks can have real-world consequences. So what can be done? What practical steps can militaries, governments, and individuals take to protect themselves in this new age of silent war? First, redundancy is key. Relying on a single system for communication or control is asking for disaster. In World War II, armies used runners, carrier pigeons, and even signal flags as backups. Today, militaries are rediscovering the value of analog systems, field telephones, paper maps, even pre-arranged signals and code words. When digital networks go down, these old-school tools can mean the difference between order and chaos. Second, training is essential. Soldiers and civilians alike must be taught how to operate in a communications-denied environment. This means regular drills, simulations of radio blackouts, and the development of contingency plans for every possible scenario. Estonia, after its cyber attack, mandated digital hygiene training for all government workers and encourages its citizens to keep paper copies of important documents. Third, cybersecurity must become a national priority. This means investing in secure networks, hiring and training cyber defenders, and sharing information across government, military, and private sectors. The United States created Cybercom, a dedicated cyber command within its military, after repeated attacks on its infrastructure. NATO now considers cyber attacks grounds for collective response under Article 5, the same article that treats an attack on one member as an attack on all. Fourth, public awareness is critical. The general population must understand that the front lines are not just at the border, they run through every server room, office, and home. Exercises like Russia's annual Zapad drills include not just tanks and planes, but simulated attacks on electrical grids and media networks. In 2019, Israel held a nationwide cyber drill, simulating attacks on everything from hospitals to traffic control systems. The goal: prepare civilians to cope with the sudden loss of digital services and prevent panic. Finally, international cooperation is more important than ever. Cyber threats cross borders in milliseconds. Sharing intelligence, coordinating defenses, and setting norms for behavior in cyberspace are vital steps. The European Union's General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, while focused on privacy, has forced organizations to take security more seriously. The United Nations is debating digital rules of engagement, though progress is slow. But perhaps the most important lesson of Pokrovsk is psychological. Trust in information, in systems, and in leaders must be earned and maintained. Disinformation, false orders, fake news, doctored images can do as much damage as any jamming device. In 2014, during the early days of the war in eastern Ukraine, Russian-backed separatists used social media to spread panic and confusion, causing Ukrainian units to retreat from positions they might otherwise have held. Today, deepfakes and AI-generated content make the problem even worse. So, what does all this mean for you? Whether you're a soldier, a policymaker, an IT professional, or just someone who depends on your phone and the power grid, you are now part of the digital battlefield. The next war may not announce itself with explosions or marching armies. It may begin in silence, a blackout, a cascade of error messages, a sudden absence of news or official guidance. The Pokrovsk collapse is not a distant military anomaly. It is a blueprint for the future. The margin for error has vanished. Complacency is no longer an option. Every nation, every city, every individual must ask, are our digital lifelines protected? Do we have backups? Are we ready to respond when the silence falls? Let's revisit a scenario. You wake up one morning and your phone has no signal. The power is out. The radio plays only static. You step outside and see your neighbors gathered, confused. No one knows what's happening. The authorities are silent. Is it a cyber attack? A natural disaster? No one can say. Panic is contagious. Misinformation spreads. In this moment, your preparedness, physical and psychological, will define not only your own safety, but that of your community. In the old world, we counted victory by ground taken, enemies vanquished, or flags raised over ruined cities. In the new world, the decisive battles are invisible, signals intercepted, networks jammed, software corrupted. The world witnessed Pokrovsk's collapse not through thunder or flame, but through the quiet suffocation of command itself. For the first time in modern history, a major army was crippled not by overwhelming force, but by a sudden, total blackout. Radios went dead. Drones lost their voices. Officers were cut off, forced to act blindly. Defense became impossible. The lesson is clear. The real battlefield is digital, and the stakes are existential. So, as you reflect on Pokrovsk's fall, ask yourself, how secure is your world? Are you ready for the next silent war? Choose vigilance over comfort. Keep your systems updated, your backups ready, your mind flexible. Knowledge is as vital as any weapon, and in this new era, it may be the only shield we have against the darkness. No one can predict exactly when or where the next digital strike will land, but we can choose to be ready. Because in the wars of tomorrow, silence will speak louder than any gunfire, and only those prepared to listen, adapt, and act will endure.